Yeah, it's been a really blah week here, in all ways. I love, to listen to Garrison Keeler, and he'd always say, well, it's been a quiet week here in Lake Wobegon. Well, it's been a really blah week here in the Hollow, weather-wise, sitting-wise. I mean, the mind that measures these things, which, unfortunately we all have, just the quality of the sits, at least to my mind, was pretty, mediocre. A lot of drifting, a lot of using the sacred word to come back. Uh, even leaning to the right, losing my, you know, just was really kind of a blah week. Riding after blah. The walks were great, but in terms of coming up with what to say, didn't have much. And actually, I didn't have anything in the morning this morning, and I was going on to Plan B, which is just come in and say, "Look, I don't have anything worthwhile saying. We're going to do a double sit." That's always to stand by. But I did my morning stuff. Woke up. Takes forever to put your socks on when you have a leg like mine. Came in, uh, made the coffee, sat down, reading a book. I always do my reading, and I thought, well, what's the use? But I did it anyway and opened up the book, and then there was this quote by Simone Weil, the uh, great French mystic, and she said, "Waiting patiently in the expectation, waiting patiently in expectation is the foundation of the spiritual life." It like jumped off the page at me. Waiting patiently in expectation is the foundation of the spiritual life. And I just shut the book, and that was enough reading. And I went in and sat. I always sit in the morning, and then the talk came together. It was sort of like really on the deadline, though, on the deadline. And I want to start with showing this the screensaver here for people who are listening later or who came in late. It's uh, it's the restaurant my grandfather had in Illinois, and my bedroom was in one of those awning covered things up above the sign, and I could always see that sign. Uh, and his name was Giuseppe Sarantinello, but got translated into Joe here in the United States, and so that was his restaurant, and not a really magnificent looking place on the outside, but on the inside, it was great. So I lived up there, grew up there for 6 years, and if you look at the sign, it says Joe's, and then you can't read what's quite under that, but it says air conditioned, which was something in those days, and then his sort of his logo or his mantra was a meal that's real. And up above, there's a stone up above there at the very top. You probably can't read it, but it says Joe Zarantinello, 1939, and that's when the place was built. It was built 10 years before I came along. Yeah, that stone is still up there. The building's still there, although it's been several things. There's when my uncle Mario owned it. There was a fire on Christmas Eve that wiped out the restaurant, and never went back to restaurants. It's been a hard kind of a plumbing supply place. It's been a beautician place. It's still there. That stone's still there, and that stone's got a crack through it because when the stonemason was putting it in, it fell, and actually fell, and before the sign was the last thing put. It fell, and my father said, "Yeah, it fell," and uh, killed a guy who was down below. So it was sort of like bad luck, but the restaurant turned out okay. Well, anyway, yeah, I wanted to show you that just so you'd have a visual. If you could be inside and smell the food or eat the food, that would be the real thing. But we don't have that kind of screen share here. So one thing led to another. There's a 17th century a Franciscan mystic. You might know him. His name is Angelus Silesius, and he's like, boy, his quotes are great. And he said, "The rose is without a why. It blooms simply because it blooms. The rose is without a why. It blooms simply because it blooms." Uh, and that's where this talk came from, because I just read the wild thing, came in, sat here, and then this is about a 13-year-old poem uh, came up, and I said, yeah, that, because I'm always listening back to what we did a week ago and trying to piggyback on it. And so this is the poem. It's called Joe's Place. When McDonald's planned to build a restaurant near the Piazza di Spagna in Rome in 1986, Carlo Petrini organized a demonstration in which he and his followers, brandishing bowls of penne as weapons of protest, they just howled. Yeah, 1986, near the Spanish Steps, if you've ever been there, the Piazza di Spagna. They were going to build a McDonald's. And so Carlo Petrini, who is sort of the founder of what they call the slow food movement now, he had a demonstration. Everybody had pasta out there. They were holding penne up, and then they were just saying, no, no, no. I grew up living over my Grandpa Joe's restaurant, and I would fall asleep in the glow of the neon sign flashing down below, which said simply, Joe's, a meal that's real. Fast food, like cheap grace and freeze-dried religion, has no place here in Loose Leaf Hollow. Here we cook things slowly, with attention and great love, whether it's in the kitchen or in the Zendo. Slow food, real practice for real people, is what my neon sign would say if I had one, which I don't. Slow food, real practice for real people, is what my neon sign would say if I had one, which I don't. No, my wife's garden is the neon sign out here. Yeah, so I thought that just came back to me. I thought it's worth talking about. Fast food, like cheap grace. Dietrich Bonhoeffer coined that phrase, cheap grace. Freeze-dried religion has no place, at least here at Loose Leaf Hollow. You have to, my grandmother, who's on my altar, when she cooked the sauce of the gravy for the meal, she would start the night before and boil it down, add wine, and then she'd put bits of, bones of pork bones or whatever in there. But it cooked for a day, and it kept cooking down. She kept adding wine. And man, it was like no other sauce I ever tasted. It's slow food. Things take a while to cook. And the whole week was like that. I wasn't getting anywhere. I had that, everybody's in that place. If you do this kind of work for a while, you just feel like you made no progress, like it's a washout. And, that's the mind's take on it. This is a slow process. It's a slow process. It takes a long time. And it takes a lot of patience, as Simone Weil said, but expectation too. She says waiting patiently in expectation. Yeah. People say, well, don't have any expectations. I don't know if you can keep going with that. You have the expectation of grace at some point. Amazing grace. There was amazing grace this morning because the whole thing came together in record time. I barely had time to get the picture for the screensaver, which I didn't have on my computer, and then get the Bocelli because we always had Italian music there. We didn't have Bocelli at that time. They had Caruso. Yeah, yeah. So, just relax about the whole idea of progress. This is a slow process. Um, and I heard or I saw a tape of Pema Chodron, the Tibetan teacher, talking, and she was going through how the Tibetans see it, and they said, well, then they had questions and answers at the end, and somebody said, well, how long does this take? Everybody laughed, I think, because everybody probably is wondering the same thing, like, how long does this take? And she says, it's going to take the rest of your life. There's a few groans, but that's the way it is. It's the way it is. If you really, what are you interested in? The reason Pam and I moved up here, I mean, if there is a reason for quitting your jobs in Houston with no jobs in Kentucky and moving to Kentucky in 1982, everybody thought we were crazy. And, I got to admit, we had no jobs, but I moved up, and I convinced her to move up because, well, we were 20 hours away from Chicago where the family was. But the real reason was I'd been to the monastery a couple times at Gethsemani, and the and I got a spiritual director there, and he knew all sorts of stuff I didn't know. And so I wanted to move up and work with him, and I wanted to learn what was the Trappists were a revelation to me. That I didn't know there was anything like Catholic monks or any kind of spiritual practice other than going to the Mass and saying the Rosary, which had played out for me. So I want to learn from Father Gregory, and so we moved up, and he talked to me on one walk. We'd walk for Saturdays for 2 hours through the up and down the hills and the knobs, and I said, well, what are these? Do you take a vow of silence? And he said, no, we don't take a vow of silence. And that was a big surprise to me because everybody thinks of the monks as silent, and they are pretty silent. He said, no. And so then he explained the 3 vows they take. And I think you don't have to go into the monastery to take these vows. Vows are they're not like promises you keep or break. Vows are more like lighthouses, how you navigate. When the fog rolls in like it did this week, and you don't, you can't see anything. I didn't see the talk. The first vow is stability. You take a vow of stability, and all these vows have 2 levels to them. On the practical level, it meant monks don't jump around from monastery to monastery. When you take a vow at Gethsemani, you're going to stay put. Okay, stability. Now that's one level. On the other level is you stop running around looking for stuff. You just sit down and go inside. That's the real reason for a vow of stability. You just stop running around chasing, like a dog chasing your own tail. Let me try this practice. Let me try that practice. Oh, well, that looks good. You go about this deep with everything. And then when it plays out, you stop drilling and you go somewhere else. So that's stability. And Merton, believe me, Merton wanted to go to a lot of other monasteries, a lot of different orders, and the abbot just kept saying, no, stay here, stay put. And it worked out for him. Although he was still thinking about moving to Alaska at the end of his life, but he was a monk of the Abbey of Gethsemani. And that was good, I think, for Merton. And so I learned that, stay put. We've been here for 40 years now in this place. Anybody who sees the gardens out here knows the brilliance of staying put if you have a wife who's a gardener. Well, the second thing is obedience. And on a level, it means what the abbot says goes. If he says sit here, if he gives you this job, that's what you do. But on the deeper level, it's audience. It's Latin. Is the root of obedience. It means to listen. Audience, like audio, ab audio. And it means to listen with the ear of the heart. Listen into the deep. So stability, listening. The third one, the Latin term is conversio morum, and it really in Latin what translation would be a conversion of manners or a conversion of behavior, but it really means why are you in the monastery? To be totally transformed. Into what? Not into an angel or a saint, but into who you're uniquely meant to be. Each of us has a unique destination. Now that's the premise behind it. And if you can stay put and keep listening, uh, boom, the rose blooms. You know, there is no why. The rose is without a why. Dante in the third part of the Commedia, when you're in paradise, paradise is a white rose with all these folds and petals and which are levels, and but that's what you're going towards, this perfect rose that's just bloomed. That's an image of what Merton called the true self, what you're meant to be, what you're meant to be, how you're meant to actually bring the energy uh, of the divine into the world. That's not small potatoes. We're not just meant to survive and ward off death as long as we can and make a few bucks and maybe live in comfort. Well, all that's not bad or anything, but is that it? I don't think so. At least not from my point of view. And then certainly not from the Trappist point of view. And, I've seen some monks who actually made that, Merton being one of them, Kelty, Father Matthew, Gregory. I've seen some guys that actually work, and I know some monks that hadn't worked yet. And as a matter of fact, it might be the wrong place for them to try this experiment. But you don't have to go to the monastery for this. Just notice when you're running around looking for stuff, just speeding through life. If we have we have many problems in our culture, but one of them is it's a quickaholic culture. We think you should be able to get it quick, take a pill, get an app, and it should be quick. And if it's not quick, there's something wrong with me. I must not be doing this right. See, and that's the whole idea about slow food and slow spiritual practice. Real practice for real people is slow. Okay, and but the expectation that Simone Weil had, and it turned out the expectation that worked out today, that if I just waited and trusted, something would bloom. Well, it did. It did. And that's been my experience all along. So, next week we might do a double sit if nothing comes. And that would be good because, well, why take up your time on something that doesn't really, isn't from the heart for me or didn't seem to be made for you. But hopefully this gives you a little perspective on your own journey. I was being pretty hard on myself, as ones are known to be. Should have had a talk by now. Should have had a new poem by now. That kind of things. Yeah, that's how it works for me. So I think that's pretty good. Yeah, let's leave it at that, and we'll just have a little more time for sitting.